That's Nick.
And that's Joseph. And today we're here to talk about Spenser Confidential, which, I guess premiered on Netflix on March 6, 2020, starring Mark Wahlberg, directed by Peter Berg. It is the 5th collaboration between star and director thus far.
Describe the plot.
It's about an ex-Boston cop who becomes embroiled in an investigation when two policemen are murdered the day that he is released from prison that he has close personal ties with, and he has to help aid the investigation in order to kind of clear his name, and he discovers a nest of corruption.
So it's like an action thriller.
So this is a remake.
Oh. Mm-hmm. Of what?
Of the, well, it's a popular series of novels by Robert B. Parker, and it was a 1985 to 1988 television series called Spenser for Hire, which starred Robert Urich and Avery Brooks, which had a spin-off called A Man Called Hawk, which featured Brooks.
Okay. All right.
Parker also wrote, I think there was a Tom Selleck series, Jesse Stone or something, that was popular as well.
Okay.
So Peter Berg directed it. The script was adapted by Sean O'Keefe, who's before this was a producer. He produced that movie Godsend with Rebecca Romijn and Robert De Niro, and Brian Helgeland, the Oscar-winning screenwriter / director. Helgeland, notably for his directorial debut that you saw that he was fired off of in 1999, was Payback, which was an adaptation of the famous Donald Westlake, Richard Stark character Parker, although he wasn't allowed to use that name then.
Okay.
So obviously Helgeland is interested in these pulpy detective fiction writers.
Well, let's start with positive things. So what did you like about the film?
Not much, to be honest. But Alan Arkin is always a bright spot for me. But again, he's kind of giving the shtick that I've seen him do quite a bit. Other than that, not a whole lot. I chuckled at a line here or there, but what did you like?
The humor that was sporadic was, I mean, I chuckled a few times. That would probably be it.
That said, I don't really think this is supposed to be a comedy.
So then, yeah, let's talk about it. So I do think people will like this film because there's action. People like Mark Wahlberg, so people will like it, and it's like the #1 movie on Netflix right now. So, whatever we have to say doesn't matter. I am not the biggest Mark Wahlberg fan.
Same.
However, he kind of delivers the same thing in every film, which can work. Like, he's kind of like I feel like he's like a more sort of like hetero Ryan Reynolds type, like bro-y, kind of funny. It can work, and I thought it worked in this film, like, to a degree. I think the biggest weakness is it feels kind of cheap, like a made-for-TV movie.
It does.
And the writing, like the actual story, is not very strong. So he plays an ex-cop, and he's an ex-cop because he was convicted of a felony for assaulting like a police sergeant or something. Captain. Mm-hmm. Because he walked in on this captain like abusing his wife, and he thinks that this captain's corrupt. So for some reason thought it would be better to whoop his ass instead of notifying the appropriate authorities. But his behavior is just a string of things that don't make sense. Like as an ex-law enforcement agent, he should know the proper way to handle these things. But instead, he decides to just kind of be a vigilante, which makes even less sense because he's like on parole. He just got out of prison, and he's putting himself in situations where he could very easily be thrown back into prison.
It feels very archaic. Like it's written like it should be still set in the 80s, perhaps, when men could get away a lot more easily with this kind of behavior.
Sure.
And even the interweavings with speaking to the FBI agents that are involved towards the end of the film. Like, that all feels like maybe how things used to be, but...
It does feel archaic in its approach to this issue, which is... So the main plot line is that there are these corrupt cops who he's trying to take down, who are, like, involved in this, like, sort of payola thing to get, like, some casino in the Boston area built. So that story feels like it should be so big, right? Like, Boston's a major metropolitan area. This is like a multi-billion-dollar business venture. it just seems so odd that like one ex-cop could take down these two cops and like it just seems like it's not big enough for what the story is.
I agree.
This could have, any kind of like cop drama, thriller, action film, it's very easy to make those captivating, but this one just felt kind of boring because his main companion is the black guy.
Yeah, Winston Duke.
Mm-hmm.
From Us and Black Panther.
Yeah. Who, is fine, but he plays like this gentle giant who's also an ex-felon, who's like a fighter, but doesn't really know how to fight. And he kind of assists him, but everything he does also doesn't make sense as someone who's probably also on parole. Like he crashes into a building, he vandalizes a car.
A nice car.
A very nice car, just because. It's not funny enough to compensate for the story not making a lot of sense. For my taste, I think it should have gone in the more comedic direction.
Considering it's starring Wahlberg, yes, because I don't think he's well suited for this suave kind of character that Spenser is.
Sure.
Because it's set up to where he's an ex-cop, but he's going to become a PI. Kind of that's where we end up.
So that like if there were multiple installments.
Yeah, as they were with the novels, and I don't see Wahlberg as being able to shoulder that because he doesn't have much of a personality. That said, his previous films with Berg that work best, which are based on men in extreme conditions like Lone Survivor, Deepwater Horizon, or even Patriots Day about the Boston City marathon bombing, which I thought was a little schmaltzy. That they seem to work okay in that regard, but like their last film together was Mile 22, which I couldn't even if I was tortured, I couldn't recall exactly what it's about, except he's a cop in Indonesia with information he needs to get out. But I don't see them pivoting well together on...
Well, I'm sure people won't like a negative review of this film, so the only other thing I'll say is... Which I just forgot. Dude.
Well,
so
there's more to talk about I didn't like. I didn't like Iliza Shlesinger, who is his ex-girlfriend.
That's what I was going to say. This film seems like it's supposed to be like a love letter to Boston, but it paints Bostonians and like Boston law enforcement in a really negative light. So that's a little odd to me. His ex-lady friend, she's probably the source of most of the laughs I had. But she's very, like, heavy, like, all the stereotypes that we have.
She's a big cliche, yeah.
Yeah, which, is funny to a degree.
And, like, the screenplay is so bizarrely out of tone. Like Michael Gaston, who plays the crooked captain that gets, like, butchered with machetes.
Right.
Which also feels way over the top for... the film. Right before that, there's all this detail about him talking to his daughter about a school report, about Zenobia, which she must be writing about Ethan Frome. But that level of detail is so bizarre.
It's lost on
so it may be too many cooks in the kitchen and things got retooled specifically for Wahlberg.
Oh, who's the corrupt black cop?
Oh, I like Bokeem Woodbine.
Bokeem Woodbine is probably the only person I took seriously in this film.
Yes, and he's the best part of Queen and Slim as well, if you haven't seen that.
He definitely adds some credibility.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But his talent and his acting is lost on this screenplay.
Yeah, it's in a lot of films. But
the only other thing I want to say is Post Malone is in this film.
Oh yeah,
which is like
that's unnecessary.
So
and Mark Maron also is a bit unnecessary.
Oh, Mark Maron, who's cool, but yeah, I feel like a little unnecessary.
I didn't like the score by Steve Jablonsky, who did the score for Deepwater Horizon. It felt like it was trying too hard to be light and funny, and those very stereotypical moments.
Like the score didn't work.
That tinniness was driving me crazy. It's also a bit too long. I think it's almost 2 hours. I don't know.
If you like Mark Wahlberg or mindless action, then I guess. Although, my last thought is the fighting, the choreography is not very strong. It's very the editing it's very obvious that there's a stunt double in comparison to something like John Wick.
Or for something like Lone Survivor with Berg and Wahlberg, like that was grueling to watch these veterans.
I think maybe Mark Wahlberg had like a spare 2 weeks in his schedule and thought, throw me in here, write me this check. I don't know.
Didn't someone publish his like eating regimen? And
he looks great. He looks great. He's fit. Like, you know, I don't dislike him that much. I just think that this film, he could do better. And this film feels like it was slapped together really quickly. There are some cute components, but it doesn't blend well together. For that reason, I would give this film 1.5 out of 5 stars.
I'd give it 1 out of 5. It's not only bland, but I feel also entirely forgettable. But
sure. Anything else?
No.
Bye.
Bye.